Everyone, welcome to another Animation Friday, and today for this video I thought it would be cool to address some patriotic cartoon shorts. For the most part, these shorts are relatively old, but they also sort of resemble an interesting take as far as American, I guess you could say, culture and sort of identity. So I thought I would address these shorts since we are within the 4th of July Day weekend, within the United States at least, and discuss them, or at least the ones that I managed to find, because this was a rather difficult list to ultimately create. But right out of the gate, let's start out with Popeye. Excuse me, didn't mean to sneeze there. And this short is called none other than Patriotic Popeye. Now, basically what occurs within the short is fairly straightforward. You have Popeye celebrating with his nephews the 4th of July, and fireworks are involved, and the nephews sort of don't follow Popeye's rules and sort of take advantage of him in various instances, and that ends up resulting in a lot of mishaps. And then you sort of see how ultimately they sort of end up becoming kind of closer together, and they kind of compromise what they ultimately want to do, or basically how they wish to sort of celebrate the 4th of July. And it has all of those kind of American sort of things that you would associate with 4th of July. Like, for example, there's Popeye on the barbecue at one point. You see the fireworks. You see the sort of the American colors being showcased, and it's a rather enjoyable, cute little short that is probably the most closest resemblance to the way we see the 4th of July today. So I think it's definitely worth a recommendation, and I will be sure to put a link below to that short, as well as all the other shorts that I'm going to be mentioning on this list. But I think that's ultimately all I can say about that one. Moving on to the next one, Der Fuhrer's Face. Oh yes, this is a pretty famous one. And instead of it being Popeye, it is Disney, in particular Donald Duck. And initially it doesn't really start off as I guess it starts off as a fairly patriotic short, but not for the United States. But it is really designed to give you an understanding of kind of what was sort of going on during the time, and how it's kind of over-exaggerated within this short, in particular during World War II, with Hitler and all of those other major Axis powers. And then you'll also sort of see too what ultimately Nazi Germany at the time was doing doesn't represent sort of the United States, and in doing so, by having the short sort of end with Donald sort of waking up into that world, he suddenly feels happy, and that's sort of what brings people on the lines to somehow say that this is propaganda. And I'm not saying that probably has some truth to it, but I think this short is very enjoyable for its over-exaggerations of things. And I think its humor suits itself well, and it really appeals to the sort of feelings that people had within the United States at the time, and why people were so patriotic, as far as, standing up and fighting someone like Hitler, because pretty much, as you can tell by the short, that Hitler goes against pretty much everything that the United States stands for. So that's pretty much what the short was, I think, ultimately trying to convey, this understanding that having people be put down, you won't be able to do that because we're just gonna rebel against you. And hence, I think the way they say, we heil right in the Fuhrer's face. We sort of slap him because as a form of rebellion, because our dedication to what our country stands for is completely against everything that you represent. So I think that's kind of really what ultimately the short boils down to. And it is rather interesting to see these kinds of older shorts that were going on around this time. But this one was the most, I think, kind of patriotic, because you kind of did get this sense, especially within the end of the short, that they were trying to rally the country kind of together and go against this sort of evil foe. So that's kind of really ultimately, I think, the message that the short's really trying to send. That it's better to be free and to make your own choices than be under some dictator. So that's really all what that short, I think, boils down to, and it does it in a very funny way, and the song is actually pretty catchy that they play throughout the short. Next one that I wanted to mention is actually more on the educational side. The Schoolhouse Rock Shot Heard Around the World. This one basically highlights the way in which the United States went to war in the first ever, really, I guess, technically, war for independence, which is the Revolutionary War. And they talk about the one shot that sort of started a revolution, so to speak, of American people, or colonists they would call them during the time, against the sort of British Empire. And it basically goes through the entire short, the history and how we became a nation, and that's really what the 4th of July celebrates. So obviously, you cannot exclude this one particular short. It has a little catchy song to go along with it. It's fairly innocent and lighthearted. I mean, could some people argue that maybe like the whole idea of glorifying war as this, it's as a, I guess, patriotic duty, could that be a little bit biased for some people, or people saying that, oh, it's not a good idea to spread a message of using, I guess, violence. But I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes these things just kind of happen throughout history. And I think it just tries to explore it within an educational way. And I don't think it tries to say that, yeah, we should all go out and fight, and that's the only way we can show any kind of patriotism. So really, it kind of glosses things over and makes it rather kind of just happy and simple. But I think that works from an educational perspective, because at least it's showing you what happened, and why ultimately people ended up doing those things, and doesn't really try to, I think, paint a very one-sided approach to things. So I think that ultimately works out really well, and it's a fun, cute little short. So I think it's definitely worth a recommendation. Moving on to the last one, Make Mine Freedom. So this one is actually from a lesser known animation studio. And the interesting thing about this short is it addresses the sort of American dream and all of that through a more economic perspective, rather than through a historical or through a traditional perspective. because basically what we have throughout this short um, is a sort of tale of how when people give up their freedom, they sort of give up their ability to um, make their own decisions in life. And in doing so, that has a lot of consequences. And the whole economic system of capitalism is supposed to be about, somebody produces something for somebody else um, in exchange for money, and then in doing so, there is innovation and sort of progress, so to speak. Um, and, just letting the government kind of take reins on everything is a bad message um, that the short sort of claims. And basically, they kind of try to paint the state as this like very sleazy. It's funny because they portray the guy that's supposed to be sort of, I guess, a government official or something. They paint him as like this very sleazy salesman. Kind of funny, but in doing so, I think the idea behind it is we shouldn't try to pit ourselves against each other and manipulating people and and trying to take away certain freedoms really is what ultimately the United States is not about originally through its founding. So I think that's really ultimately what the short is trying to say is that you sort of make your own destiny here. It's you can do whatever you want, and trying to you know um, trying to limit the freedom to do things creates more complications and more divisions among society and all that. So it brings up a lot of interesting concepts and ideas, and I think it's definitely a interesting short to check out. And I think really ultimately the purpose of this short is to just convey how America was able to become this very this big superpower, and a lot of it was based within innovation and technology and all of that stuff. And the capitalistic economic system allowed that to happen. So that's really at the heart of that short. But yeah, I think those are all of the shorts that I could really find that I think sort of address this kind of idea of patriotism. And I think people are obviously going to have a different definition of what the United States is and what it represents and all of that, and what culture do we have here, because we're one big melting pot. And I think the idea is that we should all kind of celebrate our way of living, and be happy that we exist as a nation, because we've shaped a lot of things throughout history through our existence, and I think it's great that we have a day that sort of honors that. And it's cool to check out some shorts that sort of address that. But yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care.